Hi, I'm Dr. Paul Jenkins, a child and family psychologist, and I'm here today to help you know how to come up with effective consequences that do not require cooperation. I'll give you the psychology first because that's important to understand, but then I've got an effective tool that I want to share with you a little later, so stick around for that. The first thing to understand from a psychological standpoint is the interplay between control and maturity. Now, when I say control, I mean control over your own life. And think about it, that goes from 0, no control, up to 100%, all the control. Keep control in mind somewhere while we talk about maturity. The most common way we think about maturity is how grown up you are. So at birth, how much control do you have over your own life? Hardly any, right? You can make a big noise and a big stink. That's about it. How about as an adult? Now, if you're an adult, you've probably got some small print, some disclaimers running through your head at this point. But when I ask teenagers, for example, how much control do the adults have? Oh, 100%. Okay, so let's just go with what they're saying for a moment. As an adult, ideally, you have full control over your own life. So think about it. As you gain maturity, you also pick up control. The more mature you are, the more control you have over your own life. We okay with that so far? Now, here's what's going to change it and make it so powerful. We're not talking about age. Age is only one of the ways that we measure maturity. But think about it. We all know adults who are pretty immature. You know a few, don't you? And we all know young people who are pretty precocious. They're quite mature in a lot of ways. What do we mean when we say someone is immature or that they're very mature? See, we're talking about responsibility. And we're talking about moral decision making. And we're talking about their ability to cooperate and interact with other people. So let's simplify this. I'm going to break it into 3 stages for you. These are important when we come back to the consequences. Stage 1. Stage 1 is the least mature. At stage 1, we tend to be selfish and self-centered. We tend to be very focused on what I want. It becomes a very demanding thing. At stage 1, we're throwing tantrums or fighting or screaming for what we want. Sound familiar? Yeah, and 2-year-olds are really good at this because they're immature, right? But notice this, a teenager can be pretty good at stage 1 too. I have seen some doozies of tantrums thrown by teenagers or even adults. So it's about stage, not age. Now let's go to stage 2. Stage 2 is kind of middle of the road. Stage 2 is where we stop fighting and start cooperating. This is a key to coming up with effective consequences. So keep that in mind for a second. At stage 2, we don't want any trouble. We want to keep the peace. So we're going to go along and comply and try to help out where we can. Stage 2 is a lot more pleasant, and you get to have more control if you're on stage 2. Stage 3 is the highest level of maturity. That's where we truly take responsibility for our own actions. We take initiative. I love that word. It means that we understand what needs to happen, and we do it without somebody having to ask us to do it. This is a much higher level of development. At stage 3, we have empathy, which means we understand and care how other people feel and how our behavior might impact them. We engage in service and we make good moral choices at stage 3. Now, it's pretty uncommon for parents to come to me as a professional psychologist and say, "Doc, can you help? My kid is so mature." Doesn't happen. Usually they come in and say, my kid should be behaving better and obeying and being respectful, but they're not. And they're all frustrated because their kid's on stage 1. So what I find myself doing as a professional psychologist a lot is helping parents understand what to do if their kid's on stage 1. And that might be what you're wondering about too. When we're talking about consequences, Consequences are important on stage 1 and on stage 2. Stage 3, you don't have to worry about it too much because they're kind of taking care of themselves at stage 3. But stage 1 and 2, we're going to use consequences. There's an important difference in the kind of consequences we use on stage 1 versus stage 2, and the key is cooperation. Do you remember when I was describing the stages? You don't even get cooperation until stage 2. At stage 1, they're refusing to cooperate. They're being defiant. They're going up against everything that you're trying to do with them, so they're not cooperating. What that means is we have to choose consequences on stage 1 that do not require cooperation. Now, I've taken the time to explain the psychology behind it because that's going to help with the brainstorming. How do we come up with effective consequences that do not require cooperation? Look, I've done some of the work for you. I've put together a one-sheet PDF that will get the juices flowing as you think about how to come up with these consequences. Just go grab it. Go to the URL that's on the screen right now, drpauljenkins.com/consequences. I've done some of the work for you to just get the juices flowing on how you can come up with these. The key here is, what can I enforce 100% whether my kid is on board or not? I have to tell you just a quick story about a time when our nephew was living with us. He was 13, 14 years old at the time, big, husky kid who was getting into some trouble at school and whatnot, and he came to live with us for the summer. Well, we had many grand adventures. And I remember a time when he was refusing to cooperate. And for a teenager to refuse to cooperate creates a real challenge for parents. We didn't have any teenagers at the time. All of our kids were younger. And as he is defiantly just kind of in my face and refusing to cooperate, I went in and had a little conversation with Vicky. And we call this a parental powwow, okay? When mom and dad come together and talk about, okay, what are we going to do about whatever's going on with the kids? And I went into the bedroom. I still remember just going in, closing the door behind me, and I said, Vicky, he's on stage 1. And she's like, you think? The whole neighborhood can hear that, with his yelling and screaming and defiance, okay? And so what we had to do is come up with some consequences that don't require cooperation. You'll see on the list that I'm giving you free access to that there's a lot of categories that we don't always think about. What do we provide? Like services or access. Okay, so Vicky and I started thinking about, we provide access to different spaces in our home. We provide access to electricity. We provide access to our vehicles. We provide access to equipment in our home. Do you see how this starts to roll out? And not only do we provide that, we control access to it. And we don't need his cooperation. So we're making this whole list, right? And I would encourage you to do the same. Start brainstorming. In fact, when you download that list, print it out and make a list of your ideas on the list so that you'll have that ready and available for you in the moments that you need it. That's when it's hardest to think, is when the heat is on. So let's get those tools into your hands. Remember, the key is, what can I enforce 100%, whether or not my child is on board, whether or not they even know what those consequences are going to be. You know what? I'm going to throw you that one too, because sometimes from the kids I've heard, hey, you didn't tell me this was going to happen. And my favorite response, you're on to me. Yeah, I'm not always going to tell you. All you need to know is that every choice has a consequence. The better my choices, the better my consequences. Any questions? And I always like to flash a little smile. When parents are smiling, kids are thinking. Remember, what can I enforce 100%? Start brainstorming, make the list. Once again, that free cheat sheet is available to you. drpauljenkins.com/consequences. I've already started the brainstorming list for you. Print that out and then put your good ideas on there. You've got this. Now, before I turn you loose, sometimes parents ask me, yeah, but what if the consequences don't work? Usually what they mean is, it didn't change my child's behavior. Let's just do a little mental cleansing here for a minute on the concept of consequences. The very word itself, consequence, from the Latin roots of that word, it means it comes with some kind of a following. It follows something, okay? Consequences are not there to manipulate your kids. Consequences are not there to make your children do something. Consequences are there because they follow with something else. Their choice is followed by this thing that comes with it. That's what a consequence is. So it's not that consequences work or don't work. It's that consequences come with particular choices. When we change our own attitude about that, it changes the energy that we have as we're working with our kids. So when you're tempted to think that the consequence isn't working, make a little mental shift to say, oh, this is simply what comes with that choice. It's not there to change the choice. Does that help a little bit? I think that little energy shift is going to make a difference for you as well. Thank you for the good work you're doing as a parent. I'm glad that you're here on the channel. I hope you're finding it helpful. Remember that free resource. Go grab it if you haven't yet. drpauljenkins.com/consequences. I got your back here.